now concerning this topic. There's a lot of brethren that ignore it and turn a deaf ear to it, and at least those I have met, talked to, tried to hand out material to, try to get them to listen to tapes. They just will not listen. But I would say I would be at least willing to listen to something and see if that's what the Bible teaches. But we need to hear the evidence on this, and we need to judge a tree by its fruit and not necessarily by its roots. And I'm sure Brother Meredith would present those things very well.
Friends, I appreciate the opportunity of being here and being on this program again. And we appreciate your interest in this lectureship, and some of you have come for several miles. And we hope that the things that we talk about will be helpful and beneficial to all of us. Now, for the next few minutes, I'll be discussing the subject of the Total Commitment Movement, or the Crossroads philosophy and the Crossroads Movement. There'll be a lot of terms that many of you may not have heard before, and these terms we'll try to explain as we go along from time to time. The Crossroads Movement, or the Total Commitment Movement, is actually a movement that's a combination of Phariseeism, where they have man-made rules and regulations. It also has cultic aspects, where there is the development actually of human cultism. It has a disregard for the New Testament pattern of the organization of the church, namely where Christ is the head and elders are those who decide matters of judgment. The Crossroads Movement and the people in it usually do not like elders, and they usually do not like preachers, and they have a system where they can circumvent and go around preachers and elders. It is also a system that, as you look at it, that deals and follows human philosophy. This book, Master Plan of Evangelism, is based on human philosophy. And all of this is interwoven into the Crossroads Movement. Now, the Crossroads Movement is the result of the efforts and the work of the Crossroads Church in Gainesville, Florida, to make a long story short. Now, you may wonder, what about its name, the Crossroads Church? Is that the name of the street? No. Is that the name of the town? No. I've just told you it's in Gainesville, Florida. Well, is it the name of some highway nearby or something? No. Well, where did they get their name? From a philosophy. And they'll tell you that. They want to meet people at the crossroads of life. The name of it, Crossroads Church of Christ, is the name of a philosophy. And the way they get their name is from the New International Version of the Old Testament. They don't get it from the King James American Standard. They don't even get it from the Living Bible Paraphrase, brother. They get it from the New International Version. The idea of crossroads, stand in the crossroads. And they say they're going to be there to meet people at the crossroads of life. So the very name of it has to do and deals with a philosophy. It is the outgrowth of a youth movement that's been going on and was going on in the 60s. The idea of organizing, getting young people, rebellion against older people, letting young people run things. If you don't like something, brother, demonstrate against it. Do something about it. Now, you may think they won't ever affect me, but you may be surprised. I was talking with a preacher in San Marcos, Texas recently. He said that he'd preached in a church in Arkansas when he was in school. He had just come back through there, and the Crossroads Movement had just split that church. Church is split in Miami, Florida. There's a Crossroads Church in Miami, Florida. Tampa, Florida, there's the new Crossroads Church. Orlando, Florida. Thomasville, Georgia. The Carolinas have been hard hit. I had a meeting recently in Iuka, Mississippi, and the preacher there had been on the mission field out in South Carolina. He said when this Crossroads Movement first came along, he thought it looked like a good idea, getting people to work. He said his daughter got involved in it. And then his daughter came to him one day, this is the preacher's daughter now, and she said, "Dad, something's wrong with this movement. Something bad wrong." And at first he said, I must admit, he said, I kept telling her that it's really all right, But she kept coming back and said, Dad, there's something wrong with the Crossroads movement. And then she began to explain what all they were doing, and he had his eyes opened up. And then he began to work with other members of his family, and he had to work hard to keep them out of it, some of them. Churches have been split all across the country. At least around 20, 25 churches have been split, maybe more than that. I was over in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They had a gathering of about 600 people. They had it on a Thursday night. The churches in the area were there to speak on the subject of the Crossroads movement. After the speech, one of the guys came down the aisle. It was a Crossroads advocate, and he wanted to defend Crossroads. One guy came forward. He said, I'm a lawyer. My profession is I'm a lawyer, and I believe in the Crossroads movement, and I want to argue this, discuss this with you and present my arguments to you. I said, all right, I've got an argument for you first. And my first argument is this. Here are churches that are at peace. Here comes the Crossroads movement. They've split at least, and I started naming them off to him, between 20 and 25 churches and maybe more. That's a fact. Now, Paul says in Romans 16, 17, and 18, mark them which cause divisions and offenses, contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them. For they that are such serve not our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by good words and fair speeches deceive the hearts of the simple. I said, that's my first argument. You answer that one, I'll give you another one. He turned around and left. One of the elders standing around, there was a group standing around by then. One of the elders standing by said, I'd sure hate to have that lawyer defend me in a court of law. He took off. Now, brethren, this movement is a serious problem. It's a serious threat. I was in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. This is Tennessee. A fellow visiting one of his aunts during the week came in my office one morning. She sent him down there to talk to me. I found out why. He walked in, began to talk about how he'd been in Florida. He lived in Florida, visiting his aunt there in Tennessee. He wanted to defend the Crossroads movement. He said, well, I was a part of that movement when we went in and we split that church there in Florida. There he was at Tallahassee. Why, he said, we got together, we walked into that eldership, and we told them, do you believe in sharing Jesus? And they muttered around, and they didn't believe in sharing Jesus the way we thought they ought to. And we told them if they didn't start sharing Jesus the way we thought, we was going to leave and start another church, and he said we did. Now, that's it. Now, brother, that's wrong. That's wrong. To go into an eldership and share Jesus. I just started out, I said, well, tell me about this sharing Jesus. Where did you get that in the Bible? Just explain that to me. I'm a country boy, and I just like to know about this sharing Jesus. Now, I read in the Bible where you teach the truth, preach the word, and things like that. What do you mean by sharing Jesus? But you're going to find that's one of their favorite expressions. We got to share Jesus. Well, most every eldership I've ever met, there might be some somewhere, but most of them that I've ever met are interested in preaching the gospel and teaching the gospel. Well, that's one of their elders. They may not believe in this brand of sharing Jesus. That may be the problem. But to go in and split a church over what you think the plan ought to be of sharing Jesus, which is nothing but a humanistic plan anyway, and to split a church like that, that's wrong. That is as wrong can be. That is not the Spirit of Christ. In a discussion of this movement, some years ago out in Texas, and it's various places it's about the same story, there was a church that was supporting a couple of men that had been trained by the Crossroads movement. And then they noticed things were going wrong. And then when they studied the matter in depth and finally made an announcement, here is the announcement they made. They refused the Crossroads philosophy and rejected it and dropped the men they were supporting. And here is why. Because the Crossroads movement says that a person should be refused the right to be baptized until some other human counselor decides or judges that the candidate has sufficient mature knowledge. Now you may think, well, that sounds kind of innocent. But now you wait a minute. You mean some human counselor is going to decide whether or not you're ready to be baptized? One fellow in Florida went forward 5 times before they baptized him. I'm not talking about a 5-year-old. I'm talking about a grown man, been going to church for a long time. He went forward 5 times. They said he wasn't ready. Finally, he'd been forward so many times, the leadership said, well, he's come for the 5th time. Let's just go ahead and baptize him. But up to then, they were refusing baptism to him. Now, I'll tell you another case. This one was in South Carolina. Preacher said, I saw it with my own eyes. This lady came forward. She'd been coming to church. So she was a grown lady, been coming to church, had a seat. The preacher made a motion for the woman counselor to come up. The woman counselor came up, had a seat with the lady, talked to her, and then told the preacher, and then the preacher told the audience that the woman counselor decided that this person was not yet ready to be baptized and was going to study with the lady further. Now, when we start having women counselors deciding such things as that? And I'll tell you something else. Not only about this decided matter, they got a deal on confession now. Last week, I got a photocopy of a confession that a person was asked to make in one of these crossroads churches. Now, they don't all do the same thing, quite obviously. But here's the confession that one of them made. He made actually 3 confessions. Number 1, he was asked, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? Number 2, he was asked, will you be in submission to the elders? And number 3, he was asked, will you confess that you'll be in submission to your senior prayer partner? 3 confessions. Now, since when in the church did we start having such things on confession? You know, when you read the book of Acts chapter 8, there is Philip and the eunuch. Can you imagine Philip saying, now you got to make 3 confessions. One is you're going to confess that Jesus Christ is Son of God. Second, you're going to confess to be in submission to the elders. Of course, if they're not crossroads elders, they won't ask them to do that. And third, you've got to confess that you'll be in submission to your senior prayer partner. Can you imagine a poor man making a confession like that? Is that the confession you read in Acts chapter 8? Is that the confession you read in the New Testament? Absolutely no. The confession in Acts 8 was, the preacher asked him, if thou believest with all thine heart thou mayest, he said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He commanded the chariot to stand still. Both Philip and the eunuch went down to the water, and he baptized him. Why, we've been preaching against denominationalism for years. Here these people meet together, and they want to vote you in the church. They get off somewhere, and they want to vote you in. We pointed out Acts 8 shows that if a man understands the gospel and makes the confession, we baptize him. And then the very idea of somebody wanting to give you 3 confessions you've got to make. Well, number 2, the idea that every Christian must have a superior or more mature prayer partner to whom he or she must confess every sin, whether of action or only of thought, no matter how personal, how intimate, or how destructive that might be. Also that the one confessing may be disciplined in various ways until he or she satisfies the standards which are established by human judgment. Now you may say, what in the world is this prayer partner business? Well, that's one of the ways you control people. That's what it boils down to. You organize a little group, and you have a prayer partner. Now, the basis for this, the humanistic basis for this, is this master plan of evangelism. In fact, these 2 men that I'm talking about in connection with the deal in Texas, they were asked, where did they get all of this? He said, here it is. Here's the Bible. Master Plan of Evangelism, written by Robert Coleman. What it's supposed to do is to teach you the master plan of evangelism, turn you into a master, and that's what it boils down to. They want to make you a master. You get a group, select a group. Selectivity, social Darwinism. That's all that is. Selectivity, select a group, concentrate on the group, discipline the group, train the group. And that group, they discipline each other, they report to each other. That's the group, that's the cell. And this is the procedure that they follow. When you look at this book, they have selectivity. This is on pages 35, 58, and 59. On page 35, the principle of selectivity and concentration is engraved in the universe and will bring results no matter who practices it, whether the church believes it or not. It is surely not without significance that the communists, always alert to what works, adopt in large measure this method of the Lord as their own. Selectivity. They say the communists use it, the Lord used it. Listen, friends, there's a difference in the Lord and the communist. There's a difference in the Lord and the communist. Also, you have the way to manipulate and control people. This is the idea of obedience to leaders on page 60 and also on page 125. They tell you how to control people and how to manipulate. Followers must have leaders, and this means that before much can be done with a church membership, something will have to be done with the church officials. If this task seems to be too great, then we will have to start like Jesus did by getting with a few chosen ones and instilling in them the meaning of obedience. In other words, here's the way you get a group. You select them. These are the targets. You work on them. And if the church officials won't go along with you, you go around them. That's the elders that are not for you. You have to go around them. And not only that, but they also teach you about the prayer partner, pages 48, 49, and 100. The idea of pages 48, 49, and 100 is that you need somebody to report to, somebody to keep check on you, and somebody that will pray with you. Page 48, this means that some system must be found whereby every convert is given a Christian friend to follow until such time as he can lead another. The counselor should stay with the new believer as much as possible, studying the Bible and praying together, and while answering questions, clarifying the truth and the like. This book is a denominational book. It teaches baptism of the Holy Ghost on pages 69 to 71, premillennialism on page 103, and it has the idea of cells and actually some principles of communism and social Darwinism in it, a denominational book, and this is their, quote, Bible. Now some of them say, oh, it's not, but it is, brother. In practical terms, it is. Now, the idea of a prayer partner, someone says, well, that's in the Bible. You know, in fact, they try to argue that James 5:16 teaches a prayer partner. Confess your faults one to another and pray one for another that you may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. They say that teaches a prayer partner. Senior prayer partner, junior prayer partner. The junior prayer partner has to go to the senior prayer partner and confess up. And that gets to be rather dangerous. Because can you imagine a teenager? And I have teenagers. I have 2 teenagers. Can you imagine me believing and accepting the idea that my 2 teenagers has got to go to some person over here, some senior prayer partner, and they've got to tell them everything they've ever thought, everything they've ever done, everything they've ever said, every desire they've ever had in their heart, everything about their life? And they're going to confess that they're going to be in submission to that senior prayer partner instead of their dad? You think I'm going to accept that? I am not. A lot of parents and elders need to wake up. They need to wake up. That's not the teaching of the Bible. James 5:16 doesn't teach you got to have a senior prayer partner and a junior prayer partner. Why, we're just singing one to another. We're supposed to have a singing partner? We take the Lord's Supper. We're going to have a Lord's Supper partner? All right, you get all your partners. You got a prayer partner, got a singing partner, got a preaching partner, Lord's Supper partner. By the time you get all these partners, you don't have to do anything. You don't know what you're going to do because you got to find your partner to do it. You're going to soon have so many partners going around you won't know what you're supposed to do. The very idea is ridiculous on the very face of it. Not in harmony with the teaching of the Bible. The way they get a lot of these young people into it is they target them and give them love bombing. Oh, love bombing? What is one of these? Love bombing. A love bombing is where they appeal especially to young people. They go to university campus or college, and these crossroads workers begin to call them. They go by and see them. They give them a ride in their automobile. They help them with their schedule. They help them find a place to stay. They help them find good places to eat. They're with them all the time. Send them notes. They're part of the group. And some little old young girl that's grown up in an area where there's not much affection and people are kindly apart, and she goes off to college and no one's ever shown her any attention, and all at once she gets love bombings from everywhere, and she thinks, oh, I've died and gone to heaven. Poor thing. But if she doesn't fall in with the group and stay with them, then they'll turn their back, and then she gets shunning. She gets the shunning process. They don't know her then. She's left out then. And some of them have had severe psychological problems when they got the shunning. Listen, friendship ought to be sincere. Young people, you ought to make friends with people that are your friends. Sincerity ought to be a part of friendship, and it ought to be a part of love and life. And don't fall for something like that. When young people get caught up in cults, and incidentally, the young people are the target. Some of us older people, we're already too old. They don't have to worry about that. Now, they may work on some of you, but here's the prime targets for cults. Between 18 and 28 years old, middle class, white, lonely, drifting, searching, in a state of transition, intelligent, highly idealistic, recently hurt or disoriented because of personal crisis. That is a prime target for a cult, any cult. Whether it be Jim Jones, whether it be Crossroadism, whether it be the Reverend Moon, or whoever it is, these are the prime targets for cults. You say, how do they get people to do those things? They brainwash them. You select people, isolate people, have them to confess every intimate thought and thing to you. And you got a file, they got a file on you. And then they've got you. You're just a part of the group. You do what the leader says. And this movement has a hierarchy. They have the campus evangelist. They have the counselor, the men counselor, the woman counselor. They have the host and the co-host. They have the soul talk leaders. They have the prayer partner, the senior prayer partner, the junior and senior prayer partner. That's a hierarchy. One of them that was in the movement was talking about the movement and said people shouldn't criticize unless they've been down there. Yeah, the very idea. You can't criticize unless you've been down there. In the Belmont deal down in Nashville, Tennessee, people said, we went to Belmont. Nothing wrong, Belmont's fine. Finally, the elders voted 8-3 that it was all right to have instrumental music. Nothing wrong. They didn't say nothing wrong. It took years to get some brethren to see the light. The same thing about this. Someone says, I went to Crossroads, nothing wrong. Well, they don't do a lot of these things in those meetings like that. What group does? When you get in these cells and these groups, and you'll find out how it's done. And the very idea that you got to go anyway. You mean before I can preach against the Pope of Rome, I've got to go to Rome and interview the Pope and give him a long list of questions, and then you answer all these questions, and when you answer all these, then I can preach either for you or against you. Do you believe that? I don't believe a word of that. To preach against Baptist doctrine, I've got to go out here and chase down Baptist preachers and say, now, let me interview you now and see about this Baptist doctrine. Do you think I've got to do all that before I can preach against Baptist doctrine? Well, absolutely not. Now, we want to get our facts straight, yes. But we don't have to go through all that. One fellow I was talking to said the church where he was split, wide open. And then he was speaking out against it, and someone came along and says, you got to go down there before you can speak out against it. He said, listen, brother, they've already sent satellites out here and tore this one up, and you think I've got to go down there to ask them what they're doing before I find out? They've just split the one I'm in. And you trying to tell me I've got to go down there and find out about it? Well, I've already found out about it. They've already split the one here. Not only that, but the idea that every Christian must spend every waking hour in sharing is to find the standards established by humans. Human beings going to decide about your waking hours. The time you spend sharing Jesus, the quiet time. Some others said, I need lots of quiet time. With all these squalling, bawling children, I need lots of quiet time. They're not talking about that kind of quiet time. But what is this sharing business? What's this quiet time? What's this schedule business? Listen, in some cases, they give a fella a schedule, some of these college kids, as to what time they get up and what time they'll go to bed. They took one newly married man that just gotten a wife, just married, what time to get up, what time to go to bed, and the amount of time that he would be spending with his wife. They wanted to schedule that. He had more sense than that, thank the Lord. You mean they're really trying to schedule someone's life like that? You got it, brother. You got it. That's right. That's wrong. Yes, from 6 till midnight. They'll schedule it for you if you'll let them. Phariseeism to the core. Cultism. Get in the group. Stay in the group. Follow the leader. The leader can do no harm. In 3 different states. 3 different elderships. Had to release men that was Crossroads trained. They checked their phone calls. And every one of them averaged 2 phone calls a week back to Gainesville, Florida. You tell me it's not cultic in nature. What they all got to report in for? What they got to report for? That's causing problems all across the country. I spoke on this subject over in Martin, Tennessee, where they have a student work, and they want to keep it out. The elders said, on Monday night, you preach on it and lower the boom on it. We want to keep it out, the student work here. I did, and there was some couple there from Colorado. I don't know what they were doing there from Colorado, but they came up to me after it was over and said, you just preach on it strong. And wherever you go, preach on it, because it's torn up churches in Colorado. I've received several letters from California. The people say it split churches all over there in California, in the section they're in, Southern California. It's everywhere. It's a real threat. In fact, here is a map that shows the United States, and these dots are hot spots where they have Crossroads trained ministers and workers, and where they're going strong. In fact, you could take this map, and now you could put a lot more dots on it. This was done some time back. Really, it's done in 79. It's been going on for a while. This was done by the St. Petersburg Times
in Florida. The newspapers are after these fellows. And in this case, rightly so. In Florida, California, and other places. The St. Petersburg Times investigated it and said the Crossroads ministry has become so elitist that they view themselves as the ones who have the only road to salvation. And not only do they mean the only road in the sense, but they don't even think we're on the right road. Not only that Crossroads trained ministers and converts are exerting undue evangelistic pressures upon vulnerable students. They got a sign down at the university in Gainesville, beware of various cults, beware of the Moonies, and the various ones, and on that list, beware of the Crossroads Church of Christ. That gives some bad publicity for us, doesn't it? Not only that the church has suggested that members, including students considering borrowing on their assets as life insurance policies or taking out bank loans in order to help finance a $1.5 million church bond issue. Now they get down to your pocketbook. And that's one of the things about cults. The University Religious Council at the University of California has done a study of cults. They have a leader who is the sole judge of members' actions of faith. They have totalistic control over members' daily lives, cults do. Exclusiveness and isolation. Development of deep emotional dependence. Prohibition of critical analysis and independent thinking. Utilization of methods of ego destruction and mind control, and exploitation of members' finances. In other words, once they get you, then they want to get you and your parents' money. That the church's policies cause some young adults to forsake family and friends and to neglect study and job responsibilities in order to meet the requirements of the doctrine to attend sessions called soul talks. There was a case of a young lady that was on a leave over the weekend from college in Crossroads back home in Nashville. She came back home. They kept sending her love bombing. We miss you. Come on back. We love you. All of that. Her mother and dad, though members of the church, she told her mother and dad they just didn't believe in sharing Jesus like she did. She didn't even think they were Christians. Hard feelings, alienation, separation between parent and child. They kept sending the love bombing from Gainesville. She told her parents, I'm going back to Gainesville. She didn't even spend the whole weekend with her parents. She had to go back. Her parents were not committed. They were not totally committed. So she was going back to Gainesville. Can you imagine dividing and separating children from their parents? That is monstrous. Totally committed? Not totally committed? Don't you believe someone says in being totally committed? Totally committed to whom and to what? Totally committed to Chuck Lucas? No. Totally committed to the Crossroads movement? No. Our total commitment is to be to the authority of Jesus Christ. That's where our commitment is. Some students dropped out of the program. They've been subjected to harassment, shunning by former friends of the church, sometimes leading to psychological problems. Converts are assigned prayer partners, usually an older student or more experienced church member, to whom they are exhorted to confess their sins. And then such confessions become common knowledge in the church and are used to maintain control of the members. Even the secular press realizes how they are controlling people. And that the movement's doctrine instills excessive fear, guilt, and anxiety in converts. That's the way you control people. Guilt, fear. They say, how much time do you spend in quiet time? Don't you think you ought to spend more time? How much time do you spend in sharing Jesus? Don't you think you ought to spend more time? What's that approach? To make people feel guilty. Once you make them feel guilty, then they've got to confess, tell you everything on their mind. And then you manipulate and you control them. And you say, surely they don't do that. How do you think Hitler got those soldiers to do that funny step they did that you see on the film? How do you think Jim Jones got 900 plus people down in Guyana to commit mass murder and or suicide? How do you think that he got them to do that? Brainwashing, mind control, manipulation. That's how they do it. And young people are praised for that. And that's a shame that anyone would want to take a young person and to try to mix them up in any such movement as that. Some of the movements, they've gone really far out in some of the efforts. They don't all practice this, but here's one that did in Columbus, Ohio, near the State University campus. They were telling, the elders finally got on to the matter and was telling them things they ought not to, they're going to stop doing. One of them was excessive embracing. They have, incidentally, different embraces. We wouldn't get one of the real inside embraces. We'd get just an ordinary outsider embrace, but they have different embraces. And for those that are really in the movement, brother, you really get the right kind of embrace. But they were trying to stop, in this particular case, the elders were, some excessive embracing. Perhaps no one activity has engendered as much indignation as the practice of members of the same sex showing such outward affection for one another. Sometimes this affection has expressed itself in men sitting through worship services, massaging the backs of one another. Numbers of people are upset over this because of its homosexual overtones. And in some cases, individuals have openly avowed never to return to our services again. Well, now, I must confess, being a country boy and from Tennessee, that if I went to a place and had a seat and some man reached over to me and started massaging my back, I think I'd take a second look at that guy. And I'm not right sure I'd want to get back on the same tee with that guy myself. Now, I'll tell you. Now, they don't all do that, but here's the one where they did. The stack of letters of the problems and difficulties on this movement is staggering. Here's how they start working. The local church will begin to change so gradually that no one seems to realize it. The usual changes take the form of jazzy singing, the young people gravitating to the front of the building, and the older people at the back. The young people are told not to socialize with the older and to keep things within their own peer group. Soul talks will be set up. Prayer partners will soon follow. The prayer partners seem to be an elaborate communication system that keeps Chuck Lucas completely informed. The push for numbers is so intense that the students break. Gainesville is full of crossroads dropouts. That's how it works. That's only one of the sample of letter after letter you can read. It's the same way. Wherever you look. Another one. Our elders witness severe psychological tactics being used by the group here. Peer pressure can be demonstrated by the following examples. One young man was a bodybuilder by profession. The group would not let him sit in the front seat of a car. He had to sit in the back seat to teach him humility. One young man told of a group at Gainesville, standing in a circle and humiliating one another to achieve a prideless state. Can you imagine having young people to humiliate one another to achieve a prideless state? Can you imagine telling a big football player, now you can't sit in the front seat. You got that too much pride, you know. You need to learn to sit in the back seat for humility. Where I came from, they told a big football player to sit in the back seat, they might get a punch in the nose. They told one man that he couldn't marry a certain lady. But he decided he loved her, and that was Miss Right after all, and he went ahead and married her, and he got out of the movement and climbed over the wall. We need to preach the truth against Pharisaic pride, human philosophy, Colossians 2:8, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy, the traditions of men, vain deceit, and not after Christ. We need to teach to be in submission to the elders, to Jesus Christ. We need to teach people to stay away from cultism and do not get entangled in the cults of this world. And let our total commitment be to Jesus Christ. Thank you.